8 years after rebirth, Prince Li Ke's sealed sheet finally opened. A modern strategic reserve warehouse was waiting inside his mind. In Chang'an, powerful clans were already targeting his sister's marriage. Li Ke survived by pretending to be a reckless royal with no ambition. The hidden warehouse contained medicine, machines, weapons, and manuals centuries ahead of the Tang Dynasty. Time stopped inside, and whatever he carried out became real. One blueprint let his craftsmen multiply cloth production almost overnight. After 8 quiet years, the prince could finally attack the noble's economic grip. Chronology returned to a crowded Chang'an street, where commoners hurried aside as the notorious Prince of Shu approached. They trusted him around the poor, but every noble's son knew his fists could turn one insult into several bruising lessons. Chang'an had suffered most, especially after rumors linked him to Li Ke's beloved sister, Princess Changle. The prince harassed that noble heir relentlessly, partly to obstruct a marriage he believed could trap Changle inside a powerful clan. Yet Li Ke ignored Chang'an that morning, because confronting Emperor Li Shimin mattered more than settling another street grudge. His real goal was permission to leave the capital and govern distant Yizhou, beyond the succession battle consuming his brothers. Li Ke remembered modern history and knew Crown Prince Li Qingxian's rivalry with Li Tai would eventually poison the royal family. Neither brother would ultimately keep the throne, but revealing that future knowledge would make the reincarnated prince look dangerously suspicious. For 8 years, he therefore cultivated the reputation of a generous troublemaker who spoke recklessly and fought privileged sons. That performance gave him room to break etiquette without making ministers search too closely for the intelligence hidden underneath. Constant exercise also hardened his body, which mattered whenever his furious father answered another scandal with the military cane. After crossing the palace on foot, Li Ke confirmed that Emperor Li Shimin was working alone inside Liangyi Hall. He entered without waiting for permission and addressed the feared ruler simply as Dad, something no official would survive attempting. Li Shimin complained, but the informality secretly gave him the family warmth that imperial dignity denied him everywhere else. Most royal children trembled before the emperor. Li Ke dragged over a chair and behaved like an ordinary stubborn son. That chair was one of his few modern contributions, designed because traditional floor seating tortured his legs and patience. In his former life, Li Ke had studied electronic engineering, knowledge with little immediate value in an agricultural empire. Until the warehouse opened, comfortable furniture and a secret trading company were the best advantages he could create. Li Shimin recognized the friendly approach as preparation for trouble and demanded to hear what his son wanted. Li Ke directly requested permission to assume his position in Yizhou, surprising a father accustomed to princes, avoiding distant assignments. The emperor suspected another scheme, because Chang'an offered luxury, influence, and proximity to the throne that Yizhou could not match. Li Ke answered with the dangerous truth. He wanted no part in the escalating feud between Li Qingxian and Li Tai. 8 years studying his father's temper told him the emperor's explosive anger was mostly a performance during private family arguments. Instead of retreating, the prince offered to accept succession struggle was truly wrong. Li Shimin's rage collapsed into frustration, and he demanded why a talented son possessed so little visible ambition. Li Ke explained that Princess Yang of the previous dynasty was his mother, making court support for his candidacy nearly impossible. Even if the throne were offered freely, he claimed, the endless work and constant criticism made imperial power deeply unattractive. His blunt rejection confused Li Shimin, because every other prince treated the crown like the only prize worth living for. The emperor challenged him to explain how Yizhou should be governed. If he truly intended to accept the assignment, Li immediately opposed combining civil administration and military command under one person, since unchecked authority invited rebellion. He proposed separating soldiers from taxation, forcing commanders and officials to depend on one another, while the throne balanced both. Powerful generals should rotate between regions before personal loyalty turned local armies into private forces, he continued. A royal military academy could train middle-ranking officers under the emperor's name, redirecting their loyalty away from individual commanders. High-status princes like Li Ke should receive impressive titles but limited authority, removing both temptation and suspicion. Li Shimin and his chief eunuch stared as the supposed brawler delivered a practical lesson in controlling an empire. Their amazement vanished when they realized Li Ke's elegant structure mainly allowed him to enjoy Yi Zhou without doing administrative work. The emperor called him shameless and mocked the wealthy trading company, which respectable nobles dismissed as a merchant venture. Traditional hierarchy placed scholars first, followed by farmers and craftsmen, while merchants occupied the lowest social position. Li Ke countered that food, clothing, weapons, roads, and palace comforts all depended on craftsmen producing useful things. Merchants then moved those goods across hundreds of prefectures, feeding cities and connecting regions. The government could not supply alone. Even noble families secretly operated shops and estates, while publicly insulting commerce as dishonorable work. The scholars at the top produced little, he argued, yet controlled society, because their clans monopolized books and education. Dynasties could fall while those families survived, transferring loyalty to each new ruler without surrendering their economic grip. Li Shimin reminded him that the imperial Li family was also aristocratic, nearly trapping the prince inside his own criticism. Li Ke quickly separated the royal household from private clans, insisting the throne now represented ordinary people across the empire. He promised that developing Yi Zhou would improve local lives and strengthen his father's reputation, rather than threaten imperial control. The emperor still refused, declaring that Li Ke could not escape family obligations while his father remained alive. Li Ke jokingly suggested Li Tai as a replacement target whenever Li Shimin needed someone nearby to punish. A raised staff ended the negotiation, sending the prince sprinting from Liangyi Hall before the threat became another painful lesson. Once Li Ke vanished, Li Shimin asked his attendant whether those political and economic arguments truly came from the reckless prince. The eunuch answered carefully that Li Ke was undeniably wild, but only a fool would confuse wild behavior with stupidity. Among all the emperor's sons, this difficult child was also the only one who consistently made Li Shimin feel like a father. Outside the hall, Li Ke accepted that Yi Zhou remained unavailable and shifted toward the resources his awakened warehouse finally offered. First, he needed money, production capacity, and loyal people strong enough to survive retaliation from the entrenched noble clans. His hidden trading network had waited 8 years for real direction, and Li Ke was finally ready to mobilize it. The next confrontation would not be fought over a throne. It would begin with commerce, machinery, and control of his sister's future. Frustrated by his failed request, Li Ke searched for Chang'an and learned the empress had summoned him into the palace. Princess Changle's possible marriage made the noble heir the perfect target for both Li Ke's anger and his protective suspicion. Chang'an tried to flee when the prince charged, but a scholar could not outrun someone who trained every day. Li Ke caught him within several strides and delivered another controlled beating, while horrified guards refused to interfere. He avoided serious injury, preserving the incident as a royal scuffle rather than an open attack on the Chang'an clan. Before his father could order another caning, Li Ke disappeared and redirected his attention toward the business empire, waiting outside the palace. Li Ke was not some weird sister-obsessed creep, but in his past life, Li Ke was an only child who always wanted a younger sister. When Li Ke arrived in this world, Princess Changle was only 6 years old, the peak of cuteness. There was also a political reason. His mother, Consort Yang, was a princess from the previous dynasty. His mother was cautious and never complained. So, Li Ke made sure to stay on the good side of the empress's daughters. So the idea of his sweet sister marrying a loser like Chang'an, not on his watch. Besides, if his memory served him right, the historical Li Ke was eventually killed by Chang'an Wuji. If someone is destined to kill him, Li Ke was going to do everything in his power to ruin them first. Li Zi had already successfully sabotaged the first marriage decree back in the 5th year of Jingwan. If things got really bad, Li Ke wondered if he should just take a secret shot at him. Once Li Ke revealed the modern weapon, he could not take it back. Li Ke needed to handle the Chang'an family perfectly without putting himself in danger. If Li Ke stayed, the guards would report back, and he'd end up with another round of canes to the backside. If Li Ke hurt him too badly, it would be a provocation to the emperor. Keeping it to a scuffle made it much easier to excuse. As Li Ke bolted, Chang'an climbed to his feet and dusted off his robes. He was used to this. Ever since the rumors started about him marrying Princess Changle, he'd been his personal punching bag. The man had clearly developed a high tolerance for being beaten. He slammed his hand onto his desk, his face turning a deep shade of red. That brat, he did it on purpose. His attendant Chong Lin could only offer a bitter smile. Whether it was on purpose or not, one thing was certain. Honestly, it was already the 9th year of Jingwan, and this was only the second time he'd been hit. That was practically a record for restraint. Back in the 5th year of the Jingwan era, his father, Li Shimin, had already started preparing Li Princess Changle's dowry. Back then, Li Ke stood his ground and told his father that marrying off a girl so young was wrong. Li Ke refused to let his sister suffer like that. For his defiance, Li Ke took 20 lashes from a military staff. Lizzie was her own daughter after all, and his words had hit home. She was moved that Li Ke, a half-brother, would endure such agony for his sister. Now, it was the 9th year of Jinwan. It was natural for his father to bring it up again. If he started preparations now, the wedding would be next year at the earliest. By then, Lizzie would be 16. His fierce protection of his sister gave him a strange sense of comfort. Back in the hall, Chong Lin didn't dare say much. He figured Li Ke was probably just in a bad mood, and Chang'an Chong happened to be a convenient target. Li Shimin grumbled, rubbing his temples. Li Ke could not keep her unmarried until she's 20. Noble family waits that long. Perhaps Li could privately feel out the Prince of Shu's thoughts, Chong Lin suggested. Even if Li Ke could not officially stop the marriage, he was a master at sabotage. Li Shimin sighed, waving him off. That brat has already bolted. Go to the palace and comfort Chang'an Chong. Meanwhile, at the Shanchu Pavilion, his sister Lazy was enjoying the view. She was 15 now, a true beauty of the Great Tang. Her maid came running in breathless and shouting, "Princess, it's bad." The Prince of Shu beat up Chang'an Chong again. Apparently, the Empress summoned Chang'an Chong, and the prince ran into him. If father catches him, he'll get the staff again. Li Ke had to go plead for him. Li Ke had spent years whispering in Liz's ear about every bad thing Chang'an Chong did, especially his frequent visits to brothel. "Don't worry, princess." The maid giggled. The guards went to report it, but the prince timed it perfectly. He finished the beating and vanished before anyone could catch him. Lizzie let out a long sigh of relief. Li Ke had already made it out of the palace gates when his subordinates met him with a carriage. "Let's speak inside," he replied. Once the carriage door shut, his expression turned serious. News from the Chang'an manor. Chang'an Wuji and the Chang'an clan of Xinjiang are planning to team up against their Welly Inn and trading network. He paused, then added, "Also, Chang'an Wuji plans to impeach you at the Grand Assembly the day after tomorrow." The Chang'an clan, one of the 5 surnames in 7 clans. The elite aristocratic families of China. Chang'an Wuji's wife was from that clan, though she wasn't from the main branch. Tell their people to map out every single business the Chang'an clan operates. Li Ke usually stayed hands-off with the UI business, even though it had grown into a giant. Li Ke sneered. That old fox Chang'an Wuji shouldn't think he can push him around. The young royal would admit he did not know how to make soap, glass, or advanced farming tools from scratch. Before Li Ke started building his secret power base, Li Ke had to ensure he had a loyal team. Li Ke learned exactly how to brainwash people, how to build fanatic loyalty, and how to manage a massive hidden hierarchy. Back in his old life, Li Ke wasn't just a victim of that pyramid scheme. Li Ke was a survivor. Li Ke was smart. Li Ke was observant. And Li Ke learned their tactics faster than they could teach them. By the time summer vacation was ending, Li Ke had successfully brainwashed the entire branch. Even as they were being led away in handcuffs, they begged him to let them work for him once they got out. It was easier than Li Ke expected. Most people back then couldn't read and were deeply superstitious. When those disasters actually happened, the effect was terrifying. Li Ke did not even have to do the brainwashing himself anymore. His business, the Welly firm, grew into a monster. Li Ke had to split it into specialized branches. Li Ke opened a chain of inns called a Certain Inn, which became the largest network of rest stops in the Tang Dynasty. For 8 years, Li Ke kept the firm low profile. New recruits were processed through his orientation system, ensuring total secrecy. They knew Li Ke owned it. Of course, because a business that big needs a royal backing to survive, and he had stepped in to solve a few problems over the years. Li Ke would go gather the files immediately, Tianmeng said, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and relief. The group have lived in guilt. They've made so much money, yet they've never been able to provide for you. Li Ke hadn't needed their money or their blades yet. As a prince, Li Ke had plenty. Instead, Li Ke used the profits to take care of them. People who were considered the lowest class of society. Now they were well-fed, well-lodged, and living better than most commoners. They owed him their lives, and they knew it. For 8 years, a thick fog had occupied a space in the back of his mind. It only cleared yesterday. A piece of his old world had been ripped through time with him. In his past life, Li Ke was an electronic engineer. It seemed the entire facility, or at least a large chunk of it, had been transported into a void within his consciousness. Inside, time stood still. The electronics were dead, and the halls were empty. But every security door was unlocked. Li Ke walked out with a Type 92 pistol and 2 full magazines. The warehouse wasn't a military base, but because it held strategic civilian supplies, a squad of armed police had always been on site. Li Ke did not have enough ammo to make them sustainable, and they were too loud for his current needs. Li Ke searched the offices, finding nothing but useless paperwork until he stumbled upon a massive freight elevator. His memories sparked. This area had been top secret, off limits even to him. The elevator didn't have power, so Li Ke took the emergency stairs. Li Ke needed to know what the government had deemed so important that it had to be buried that deep. Luckily, being on the 3rd basement level, the electronic locks were all disengaged. Li Ke pulled it open with ease. Li Ke descended to the next level and froze. Before him stretched an arched tunnel at least 4 meters wide. It disappeared into the distance in both directions. Li Ke had no idea this underground warehouse even existed. Li Ke ran toward it and threw his weight against the handle. The heavy door groaned open, revealing the space inside. Li stepped through the threshold and stopped confused. It wasn't weapons. It wasn't tactical gear. Rows upon rows of bookshelves stood in perfect dense formation. Li Ke headed over to the nearest rack and saw labels categorizing them by discipline. Li Ke scanned the titles. One caught his eye immediately because of its strange name. The Barefoot Doctor's Manual, Southern Region Edition. Li Ke had never heard of it. The bright red cover gave off a distinct old-school vibe. It was printed in 1970. Li Ke opened it, curious to see why the state would stockpile something like this. This book was designed for a specific era to solve medical crises in impoverished rural areas. It was packed with traditional Chinese medicine, prescriptions, and even covered things like treating heat-stricken children or handling smallpox and mouth sores. The language was so simple that anyone who could read basic Chinese could understand it. Li Ke was stunned. This book was a masterpiece of efficiency. Most people don't die from rare diseases. They suffer from common ones. His ancestors really knew how to get things done. A few steps away, Li Ke found another relic, a friend to military and civilian talents. The first half was all about shooting down planes, ambushing tanks, identifying mines, and surviving a nuclear blast. These books radiated the anxiety of a specific era, a desperate driving need to pull an entire nation out of poverty and weakness. It was a manual for rebuilding a civilization from nothing, even after a nuclear war. That's why it was here. Whether they were kept for a post-apocalyptic future or just as a record, to him, they were divine artifacts. There were even instructions on how to produce 3 acids and 2 bases using the most basic equipment. The books were linear. They began with crude manual methods and slowly scaled up to basic industrialization. They had considered every extreme scenario, including the fact that paper is a safer long-term storage medium than digital files. Li Ke used to worry about not knowing how to make soap, refine tea, or weave high-quality cloth. Now Li Ke had the blueprints for everything. Chang'an Wuji wanted to play games. Fine. The great families of the 5 surnames and 7 clans thought they controlled the economy. Let's see how they handle what's coming. Li Ke caught books on spinning and weaving, starting from basic looms and moving up to the spinning jenny. Silk and cloth were already the Tang Dynasty's greatest exports, and Li Ke was about to break the game. Li Ke pulled out blueprints for the flying shuttle loom and the jacquard machine tools designed for intricate patterns. In ancient times, that was all the common people cared about. For food, Li Ke gathered books on livestock breeding and seed selection. They even had crops the Tang Dynasty had never seen: corn, potatoes, and sweet potatoes. Li Ke could not access those seeds yet, but he could start with scientific breeding for the crops they already had. Li Ke left the room and walked further down the corridor. A second warehouse door appeared. Li Ke pulled it open and froze. Stacked neatly and packaged by category, the room was filled with it. But this wasn't ordinary writing paper. It was specialized paper for printing currency. Li Ke had no idea how much money this could print, but for now, it was useless to him. One held specialized currency ink, and the other contained disassembled printing equipment. The corridor stretched further into the darkness, shrouded in mist. His vision blurred, and suddenly Li Ke was back in his carriage. A few modern books sat in his lap. Li Ke could not just hand these to the craftsman. The paper was too advanced, and the text was in simplified Chinese they wouldn't understand. Ancient craftsmen were geniuses. If Li Ke gave them a clear diagram, they could build anything. Back at the Prince of Shu manor, Li Ke summoned the woodworkers. 27 men arrived. 3 generations of masters, journeymen, and apprentices. They all belonged to him, body and soul. Their loyalty was absolute. Li Ke asked, handing the diagrams for the spinning jenny to the 3 headmasters. They took the paper and gasped. Then they looked at the drawings. The lines were incredibly thin and precise, and the perspective was unlike anything they'd ever seen. One master asked, his voice trembling. "The method is genius. This could change everything for their craft." "It's a secret," Li Ke replied. The 3 masters almost hit the floor to cow, stopping only because Li Ke had a strict rule against unnecessary kneeling in his house. "The design is intricate, but they can build it. It looks like a spinning machine." "It is," Li Ke said with a smile. Li Ke designed it himself. It increases spinning efficiency by 16 times. The room went silent. 16 times. They knew the current machines. They were basic, one person spinning 1 thread at a time. Large-scale workshops existed, but they were still limited by the 1 thread per person rule. In the Tang Dynasty, silk and cloth were used as currency. This wasn't just a machine. It was a literal money printer. Li Ke was limited by materials. Li Ke was about to introduce the concept of the assembly line to the 7th century. The great families and their monopolies didn't stand a chance. The machine Li Ke designed was enough to crush any competitor in this era. It wasn't just about the speed. In the same amount of time it took 16 people to spin 16 threads. Li Ke only needed 1 person. Li Ke turned to Tian Meng, his lead merchant. "How much capital does the Welly trading firm have right now?" Li Ke hadn't taken a single penny from the firm in years. Li Ke knew they were stockpiling wealth, waiting for the day he had finally need it. The reincarnated prince had always told them that business, like war and information, is the most valuable weapon. The group had spies planted in every major trading house in the capital, and their loyalty was bought with the guns the firm generated. They had no idea what Li Ke was building in the shadows. Tian Meng replied, bowing. "The best ones are in the East and West markets and the Shan Award." Li Ke nodded. The East and West markets were the beating hearts of Chang's trade. The city was laid out like a massive rigid grid. Sometimes Li Ke wondered if the original architect had been obsessive-compulsive. Most commoners weren't even allowed on the northern sections. But the Shanho ward sat right in the middle of the action. Li Ke only managed to buy that property because he was a prince. Actually, Li Ke remembered that deal well. "Are these 3 and set up exactly how Li Ke requested?" Li Ke questioned. "The group bought the surrounding shops too. Their inns are now the largest buildings in those districts." "Good," Li Ke said. "Those would be his flagship stores. Withdraw all 80,000 guan. Give 10,000 to Master Lu Diang immediately." Li Ke wanted these spinning machines built as fast as possible. Tian Meng looked like he was about to cry. Lu Dong, the head craftsman, looked panicked. Li Ke told him firmly, "Because you aren't just making one." Li Ke did not care what the Jiang or Zhang families are selling. Li Ke knew they deal in silk and fabric. The group are going to bury them. Lu Dacheng hesitated. If they produce on that scale, they'll need hundreds of master carpenters. Simple apprentices won't have the skill to build these intricate parts. Lu Shang asked, confused. "Standardized parts," Li Ke explained. One person focuses on carving one specific gear. Another person only polishes the frame. Then a final team assembles the pieces. It's like using a mold, but for labor. Lu Dacheng's eyes widened as the realization hit him. The Qin dynasty had used similar methods to mass-produce crossbows, but in the Tang Dynasty, craftsmen were private and secretive. But working for him was different. Each group of apprentices will follow the exact same measurements. Li Ke continued. If a part breaks later, they can just swap it out with a spare, because they're all identical. He finally understood. They weren't just building machines. They were building a factory. Li Ke could not wait any longer. It was time to show the great families what real competition looked like. Even if a craftsman wanted to betray him, they only knew one small part of the puzzle. Li Ke nodded. "Good, Tianmeng. Once the prototypes are finished, get the textile department on it immediately. Start stockpiling hemp and silk." Li Ke wanted them to collect as many white butterfly seeds as they can and start large-scale planting. It existed in the Tang Dynasty, but only in small pockets like Gaochong and Sha. Importing cotton will drive their costs through the roof. Li Ke wanted the price to be high. Make it higher than what the farmers get for growing grain. As for their food, they'll buy grain from nearby regions and sell it back to them at cost. It would take 3 years to see the results. But eventually Li Ke had have Gaochong exactly where he wanted them. They were always causing trouble for his father, the emperor, and now they were getting in the way of his business. Once the spinning and weaving tests are successful, expand production. When the spring silk is ready, they take over the fabric market. One more thing, Li Ke continued. Find someone to help him transcribe. Li Ke was going to dictate. Once they're done, Li Ke wanted to start large-scale pig farming. They needed to stockpile animal fats and vegetable oils, only the poorest of the poor. Most people prefer mutton. Li Ke did not blame him. In this era, pigs weren't raised properly. But Li Ke knew better. Pigs were a fortune. Every part of them was useful. Just do it. Trust him. It's better than mutton. Li Ke waved him off. Li Ke had blueprints for everything. Cement, soap, refined tea. But Li Ke had to pace himself. First, Li Ke needed the cash flow. Now get some people to his study. Li Ke was ready to start transcribing his knowledge on animal husbandry when a guard burst in breathless. Li Ke froze. Empress Chang, unlikely. Li Ke had been thumping that kid for years, and she usually stayed out of it. Li Ke asked. The guard gave a strained laugh. He left. Sir. He delivered the message and bolted. The young royal didn't want to stick around for whatever trouble. Go bring him back. He's on a horse. Li Ke cursed under his breath. Li Ke should have told his guards to detain any messengers. Li Ke dodged his decrees before by pretending Li Ke never received them, but he could not ignore the empress. She'd even saved him from his father's temper more than a few times. Still, Li Ke wasn't taking any chances. Before heading out, Li Ke stuffed some extra padding into his robes to cushion his backside, just in case. Li Ke passed the Tai Hall and saw a group of maidservants waiting for him. It was time to find out what kind of trouble Li Ke was really in. The empress is waiting for you, the maid whispered, stealing a quick glance at him. Everyone knew. Li Ke had just given Chang'an another brutal beating, and this time he hadn't held back. Li Ke let out a quiet sigh of relief. At this hour, the emperor was usually buried under a mountain of government paperwork. He rarely spent his afternoons in the consort's quarters. Li Ke followed the maid through the winding corridors. The reincarnated prince did not wait for an introduction. Li Ke strode inside, his voice trailing in before his feet even hit the rug. Li Ke made sure to sound respectful. Empress Chang'an wasn't his biological mother, but Li Ke always called her mother. When Li Ke first dropped the mother bomb, both she and the emperor were stunned, but they never corrected him. Li Ke stepped into the room, his head held high, until he saw a familiar figure sitting right there. Li Ke pulled a sharp U-turn, straightened his back, and shouted toward the ceiling. Mother. Li Ke just remembered. The young royal bolted for the door. To hell with the padding in his robes. Li Ke wasn't ready for this. A sudden burst of laughter echoed through the hall. Empress Chang'an couldn't help herself. Get your ass back here. Li roared. Oh, mother. Li Ke thought he heard father calling him from somewhere else. Li Ke better go find him. Li Ke was marrying Princess Changle off tomorrow. Li Ke froze. His hand stayed glued to the door. Slowly, Li Ke turned around, plastering a fake surprised smile on his face. He was tucked away in a corner, silent, sporting a pair of fresh black eyes that looked like a panda's. He looked pathetic. The empress was still beaming. She loved this. None of the other royal children dared to act like this around the emperor. Li Ke relaxed instantly. Li Ke headed over and gave the emperor a casual wave. Li Ke saw the vein in Li Shimin's temple throb. The reincarnated prince could practically hear his teeth grinding. Beside him, Chang's mouth twitched. Li Ke could see the realization hitting the kid's face. If Li Ke was brave enough to talk to the emperor like this, a mere official's son stood no chance. She enjoyed these moments with him. Li Shimin wasn't just a cold, distant emperor. He was a frustrated father. Your father and Li Ke was discussing Liz's marriage. They wanted to hear your thoughts. Li Ke blinked. Usually he just issued decrees and expected everyone to bow. Well, mother. Li Ke began putting on his best serious brother face. They say an elder brother is like a father. Even though Li Ke was not the eldest, he cared for Princess Changle deeply. Li Ke started laying it on thick. He needs the tactical mind of Zhuang and the bravery of the greatest generals. Li Shimin's lip curled. Li Ke knew what he was thinking. Asterisk. But the empress was glowing. Chang, meanwhile, stared at his own feet, likely cursing his name in his head. Her grace is like the moon, her spirit like the autumn water. She belongs among the four great beauties of history, right next to Juri and Dao Chan. Shut up. And Yao Chan, that was a title for a Han Dynasty official, not a woman's name. Li Ke was the Prince of Shu. Li Ke had many flaws, but being wrong wasn't one of them. Li Ke doubled down. Li Shimin took a deep, shaky breath. Li Ke puffed out his chest. His skin was thicker than the walls of Chong. He was pretty sure even he'd have to admit he was doing a great job. Enough, Li Shimin, rubbing his forehead. The group are talking about the wedding. By the time the preparations are done next year, she will be 16. That is more than old enough. This is the limit of his patience. He was looking at him hard, clearly expecting him to start a fight. Dad, you call this a discussion? Li Ke shot back. You've already made the decision. Inside, Li Ke was already calculating. Li Ke knew he was giving him an opening to negotiate. Li Ke had to stop this marriage, but he could not use modern logic like genetics or cousins shouldn't marry. Li Ke needed a different angle. Li Ke thought about using the cousins shouldn't marry argument, but he quickly tossed it aside. If Li Ke tried to explain DNA or birth defects, they'd look at him like he had two heads. Even in the future, with mass media and science, people still doubt the truth. Here, the great noble families married within their own circles to keep their power and bloodlines pure. If a noble family's child died young, and Li Ke showed up asking questions, they wouldn't give him data. They'd punch him in the face for rubbing salt in their wounds. In this era, the infant mortality rate was already terrifyingly high. Li Ke had to play by their rules. Today, Chang'an is right here, Li Shimin explained. His brow furrowed. Li Ke looked at the kid and then back at his father. It should be his father. In their world, the parents make the match. Li Shimin's blood pressure looked like it was about to redline. Life is precious, but love is worth more. Then he took a breath, trying to steady himself. Li Ke shrugged, looking completely unbothered. Fine. His request is simple. He just has to be able to beat him in a fight. Li Ke could see the words. Li Ke had have killed you years ago if he could, written all over his face. Fine. Fine. Li Ke said, waving a hand. Let's say he has to be better than him at martial arts or professional combat. Shimin snapped. He was trying to maintain his imperial dignity, but Li Ke was pushing him to the edge. A true gentleman should master the six arts. Rites, music, archery, charioteering, calligraphy, and mathematics. Everyone says Li Ke was just a brute. The room went silent. Li Shimin, Empress Chang'an, and Chang'an Chong all shared the same weird expression. He realized that while Li Ke acted like a hooligan, he actually had the skills to back it up. Chang'an Chong might be okay at calligraphy or music, but there was no way he could beat him in archery charioteering. Li Ke asked, cutting a side eye toward Chang'an Chong. Lai was stuck. He couldn't call his request unreasonable, because these were the rules of Confucius himself. Chang'an Chong took a deep breath. He knew if he stayed silent, the wedding was over. He didn't actually want to marry a princess. It usually meant his political career would hit a glass ceiling. It was about the alliance. He stepped forward and bowed deeply to him. Li Ke asked that you give him a different task, a chance to prove he was worthy of the princess. Don't act all polite with him. Just keep it to yourself. Li Ke wouldn't dare, he replied, his head still bowed. Please give him a chance. His parents stayed quiet. They knew that if they wanted this marriage to happen, they had to get him to agree. He had that old fox energy his father was famous for. He knew how to endure. If the emperor was dead set on this, eventually he'd just force it through. They knew that when Li Ke used his formal titles, he was actually being serious for once. If his sister marries you, her lifestyle, what she eats, what she wears, the house she lives in cannot drop in quality. If you can't do it, you have to break off the engagement with his sister yourself. Li Ke stared at Chang'an Chong, a cold smile playing on his lips. His father, Li Shimin, hesitated. Chang'an Chong looked conflicted. Li Ke he could not decide something this important on his own. He stammered. He was right. A marriage alliance between the imperial family and the Chang'an clan wasn't a kid like him could gamble with. If Chang'an Chong, or rather the Chang'an family, cannot meet them, then the engagement must be cancelled. He can go back and discuss it with his father, the Duke of Qi. Li Shimin stroked his beard, still wary. It's simple, Li Ke said. Li Ke had been alive for quite a few years now, father. Li Ke held up one finger, his voice steady. Li Ke would give the Chang'an family 1 year. 1 year from today, the betrothal gifts they bring for his sister cannot be worth less than the dowry Li Ke personally provide for her. It has nothing to do with the emperor's treasury or what the palace sends. This is from him, Li Ke. On the surface, this condition sounded like a joke. Even though Li Ke was a prince, everyone knew he was broke by royal standards. Between his high living expenses and the cost of maintaining his personal staff, his allowance barely covered the basics. They had years of imperial rewards, deep connections with other powerful clans, and they controlled several high-profit industries. In the Tang Dynasty, businesses that common merchants weren't even allowed to touch. He had spent the whole day braced for some impossible sadistic challenge. And then Li Ke threw him this. Li Ke did not give him the chance to feel relieved. Li Ke leaned in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Surely a man wouldn't let his future wife live a life inferior to what her brother can provide. Li Shimin rolled his eyes. He knew his serious act was over and the brat was back. Li Ke questioned, ignoring Zhang Sun Chong. Li Ke needed the emperor to buy in. If he didn't give the word, none of this mattered. Father, this is his only condition. Li Ke shot back, his voice rising. If they can't even match what Li Ke provided, how can his sister be happy there? Li Ke started acting out, leaning into his reputation as a loose cannon. Chang Sun Chong looked like his head was going to explode. They were talking about the eldest daughter of the emperor and the son of the most powerful official in the land. Empress Changsun said softly. She knew him. She knew that if Li Ke wanted to ruin a wedding, he had find a way, and no amount of floggings or house arrest would stop him. But Li Ke had one requirement. If they can't do it, they voluntarily break the engagement. Li Ke said firmly. Fine, lied, taking a deep breath. Surely the Changsun family can provide a gift, better than whatever Li Ke scrapes together. Li Ke would go speak with him immediately. Chang Sichong explained, bowing low. Wait, Li Shimin called out, looking at him. During this 1 year, you are not allowed to cause trouble for Chang Chong. After all, if he meets his conditions, he'll be his brother-in-law. Li Ke had to think about his sister's future. Chang Sun Chong said, looking relieved. Li Ke would take his leave now. Once he was gone, Li Ke bowed to his parents. Then Li Ke would be going too. Li Ke needed to get to work. Li Ke had a lot of money to make if he was going to provide a proper dowry for his sister. Li Ke bowed one last time and walked out of the hall. As Li Ke left, he could feel his father's eyes on his back. The third prince knew Li Ke was up to something. He felt the trap closing, but he couldn't see the teeth. Li Ke was going to build an empire that would make the Changsun family's wealth look like pocket change. The game had finally begun. Li Ke hadn't walked far when he spotted a tiny figure waiting by the roadside. Third brother. It was Princess Jingyang, his 3-year-old sister. She was barely 2 years old by modern standards, and still struggled to get her words out clearly. Li Ke was waiting for you, she panted, grabbing his hand. Big sister was crying. Li Ke stiffened. Which big sister? Another voice called out. Li Ke looked up and saw a girl about 5 or 6 years old approaching them. It was Princess Qingyang. If she was here, then the one crying had to be Changle. Tell him, Li Ke explained softly, looking at them both. Did Chang'an hear what Li Ke was discussing with father and mother? When that bad man came, mother told them to leave, but big sister was sad afterward. Li Ke sighed and picked Princess Jingyang up, taking Qingyang's hand in his. Come on, let's go find her. It didn't take long to find Chang'an. She was sitting alone, quietly wiping tears from her cheeks. The dam broke. Before Li Ke could even react, she lunged forward and buried her face in his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. In the Tang Dynasty, girls her age were already thinking about the boundaries between men and women. Even as siblings, they hadn't hugged like this since she was 10. The maids behind her stood with their mouthies hanging open in shock. She muffled into his robes. Li Ke did not want to. Li Ke really don't want to. A pang of guilt hit him. Li Ke realized he was partly to blame for her terror. He was a monster. She dreamed of a hero, a man of character, not a snake like him. You won't have to marry him. Li Ke promise. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him with watery eyes. Really? Li Ke said, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. You heard the deal. As long as they agree to his terms, Li Ke would not lose. They are so rich. And you don't have any money. Third brother. Li Ke laughed. It was genuinely touching. She really thought Li Ke was a broke prince, playing a losing game. Li Ke reached out and ruffled her hair, messing up her perfect style. Before now, Li Ke was just pretending. She looked skeptical. His eyebrows shot up. Lin was trying to shake down his little sister. That brat, Li Ke muttered. Listen to him, Chang'an. Li Ke was ignoring him on purpose to teach him a lesson. The Prince of Shu promised her that in a few days he had show her the first step of his plan, the business that would fund her freedom. She was curious, but she didn't push. She was always the gentle, trusting soul of the family. Just be a happy princess, Li Ke told her firmly. Leave the rest to him. After a few more words with Princess Jinyang and Chunyang, Li Ke turned to leave. In that timeline, both Changle and Princess Jinyang died tragically young. Li Ke suspected Chang'an's early death was linked to childbearing. Even their mother, Empress Changsun, passed away at 36 after having 7 children. But there was more to it. History claimed he became after falling off a horse, which led to his downward spiral. The way he described the pain and the way his foot seemed to be failing, it looked like diabetic foot. If he really had late-age diabetes, his future was grim. In this world, there was no insulin. It explained why he eventually became so desperate and volatile. Li Ke looked back at his sisters playing in the garden. The Tang Dynasty was a golden age, but it was built on a foundation of fragile lives. In this era, they called it wasting thirst, but Li Ke knew it as diabetes. Li Ke hadn't asked the royal physicians about it. His younger sister, Jinyang, however, was a different story. She seemed to have inherited their mother's fragile health. When Princess Jinyang fell ill recently, the imperial doctors had sealed every window in her room to keep out the cold wind. Li Ke could not rewrite the laws of medicine overnight, but he could force a change in her lifestyle. Li Ke had a new project. Li Ke sat down and sketched out the process for making glass. It was actually quite simple. The chemistry was basic, even if the furnace requirements were high. His father, Emperor Li Shimin, sat beside her as 2 maidservants reported his earlier conversation with the princesses. His father questioned. That's all the Prince of Shu said. His father raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement crossing his face. Regardless, Li Ke is right. The Chang'an family shouldn't be outdone by a prince's dowry. They can't give more than the emperor, but they shouldn't give less than a brother. She wouldn't protect her maiden family if they were in the wrong. Li Ke knew his father's side. Much better, his mother said, her eyes brightening. Her was right about a few things since he insisted on ventilating her room, encouraging her to move, and keeping her away from heavy pollen. His father grumbled. That's probably just Sun Seo's medical advice that he's pairing. His mother just smiled. Li Ke had claimed his advice came from the legendary physician Sun Miao, but she was clever. Meanwhile, Changsun Chang had scrambled home as fast as his legs could carry him. His father, Changsun Wuji, was waiting in the study. His voice was cold to the world. Wuji always wore a smile when dealing with him, but inside he was seething. Li Ke treated his son like a common servant, and every blow to Chang was a slap to Wuji's own face. It's fine. Li Ke was used to it. Changsun Chang spat, a dark look in his eyes. He only has a few years left to act tough. Once the crown princess sends the throne, Li Ke would make him pay. He looked at his son, disappointed. Chang replied. Wuji slammed his hand on the desk. You have no backbone. Li Ke would decide. Yes, but you must have your own thoughts. The group had to, Wuji muttered. If they back down now, their family loses all face. Besides, Li Ke knew his secret. His wealth comes from the Welly trading firm. At the next court assembly, Li Ke would impeach him, but tomorrow he would publicly agree to his terms. After his son left, Wuji sat in the silence of his study, plotting. He had to destroy his reputation in the emperor's eyes. His motivation was simple. The wasting thirst was getting worse. Wuji had checked the records. People with this disease didn't live long. Even if the emperor lived another 20 years, the crown prince wouldn't survive to see the crown. He needed a bridge to the throne, and that bridge had to be a child of Empress Changsun. As long as a Changsun-blooded prince took the throne, Wuji remained the most powerful man in the empire. He did it without anyone prompting him, which meant Li Ke held a significant place in his heart. He had talked the emperor out of it for now, but he knew that wasn't a permanent fix to him. The reincarnated prince was a prince after all. So his best move was to stain his reputation. Being the top official of the Lingdan Pavilion and the Duke of Qi wasn't a job for the impulsive. Li Ke did not know the full extent of his plotting back then. His father didn't share his private thoughts with him. Li Ke just waited for the results. In the 8 years since Li Ke arrived in the Tang Dynasty, he hadn't been idle. The reincarnated prince spent the evening reading a book on political theory he had found in his warehouse, Singa. Politics in the West was always taught differently than back home, and Li Ke wanted a fresh perspective. Once Li Ke finished, he hurried to the palace. It was the day of the Grand Assembly. His intelligence from the Welly trading firm warned him that the old fox Changsun Wuji was planning to impeach him again. In the royal family, even a small mistake can be twisted into a threat to national security if an official talks long enough. The assembly began like any other. They greeted his father, and he signaled for them to take their seats. Li Ke noticed the chairs invented were being used all over the hall. Your Majesty, Li Ke wished to impeach the Prince of Shu Liu. The other ministers didn't even blink. It had gotten so bad that people wondered if he was trying to outlecture Wei Zheng, the official imperial critic. He lacks ambition and fails the virtues of the imperial family. He is a disgrace to the royal name. The Prince of Shu requests that he be confined to his manor for a year to reflect on his actions. Li Ke was too. Li Ke rolled his eyes so hard it hurt. Asterisk. Asterisk. His informants told him he had something planned, and Li Ke expected something new. He had something to say, he said, standing up. His father waved a hand dismissively. Go ahead. He knew there was no stopping them once they started. Li Ke looked straight at Wu Ji. You've used the same excuse for years. Usually, when Wu Ji attacked him, Li Ke tried to talk his way out of it, or twist the logic to avoid being grounded. This was different. Li Ke was attacking him head-on. Cheng Yao Jene actually sat up straight, looking interested. The fact that Li Ke had had to impeach you for the same issues for years only proves you haven't changed. He was good. He'd caught his slip of the tongue and turned it against him instantly. The generals shook their heads, thinking Li Ke had walked right into the old man's trap. But Li Ke wasn't done. Li Ke barked. Everything you say is nonsense. Li Ke had put up with you for years, but today he was done. Let him ask you. If Li Ke was the crown prince, then sure, he'd be wasting his life. But Li Ke was not. His brother, the crown prince, was sitting right there. His eldest brother is here, so Li Ke would say it plainly. Li Ke continued, his voice echoing. Li Ke had studied the art of war. The Duke of Wei Li Jing is here. Ask him if Li Ke knew his way around a strategy. Li Ke had just explained the one thing no one was ever supposed to say out loud. They were probably thinking that the Prince of Shu was the biased man in the Tang Dynasty. Up on the throne, his father's face went from red to a deep, bruised purple. He wasn't mad at what Li Ke said. Some things are meant for private arguments, not for the ears of every official in the capital. His father, Li Shimin, had taken the throne by force because he was a brilliant general who had too much influence in the army. He tried to claim Li Ke was insulting the crown prince's character, suggesting his brother wasn't generous enough to tolerate a talented sibling. Li Ke looked his father dead in the eye and told the entire room that even if he offered him the throne right this second, Li Ke wouldn't take it. The third prince did not want the stress. Li Ke did not want the crown. The ministers were breaking out in cold sweats. His eldest brother, Li Chengqian, was sweating the most. At first, he looked annoyed that Li Ke had brought him into the crossfire. But once Li Ke said he had zero interest in his job, he visibly relaxed. He couldn't jump into a family argument between a father and his sons. It was a minefield. Li Ke knew if he did not stop now, he might actually have him dragged out. Li Ke put on his best innocent face. The Prince of Shu told them all. He just wanted to be a carefree prince who enjoyed his life. It was because of the condition Li Ke had set for his son to marry his sister, Chang'an. Li Ke told them that the Chang'an family had to match his personal dowry for his sister, not the emperor's official dowry, his own. If their betrothal gifts were worth even a cent less than what Li Ke provided. The engagement was off. He started laughing and taunted Wu Ji, asking if the great Chang'an family was too broke to match a single prince's savings. If he backed down now, he'd be the laughingstock of the dynasty. He snapped back, agreeing to the terms. He swore that if his gifts didn't measure up, he would have no face to ask for the princess's hand. If he disagreed now, it would look like he didn't think his own daughter was worth the price. Li Ke told them he would step back so they could get back to important state business. Li Ke had talked circles around everyone, mixing jokes with threats until the original issue, his misbehavior, was completely buried. Wu Ji sat back down in his seat, his heart likely pounding with disbelief. Even if he was seething, he had no choice. Other ministers were already stepping forward to report on state affairs, and the rhythm of the court moved on. He was probably wondering if Li Ke had manipulated the conversation on purpose, or if he was just a lucky idiot. If Wu Ji told anyone he was afraid of his hidden intellect, they'd laugh until their teeth fell out. If Li Ke hadn't been so busy making his son's life a living hell, he might have actually been annoyed. His father was brilliant and divine. Yet he had a son who acted like a carbon copy of that loudmouth thug, Cheng Yao. When they saw he had shifted his focus to actual government business, they finally exhaled. They all thought the same thing. The Prince of Shu had some serious nerve today. He said things no one else would dare to whisper. As Li Ke sat there, he scanned the room. Wu Ji and the powerful aristocratic clans were a massive problem. These elite families, the 5 great clans and 7 lineages, controlled everything. They were the backbone of the bureaucracy. The only reason they didn't hold every top-tier position yet was because the Tang Dynasty was still young. If Li Ke weren't a prince, he'd be crushed in a week. But the UI merchant group was his foundation. Li Ke looked at Wu Ji and sneered internally. Right now, he probably had more liquid cash than Li Ke did. His mother, Consort Yang, constantly gave him allowances. And Li Ke had to top him off, just to keep him out of trouble. Li Ke got beaten by his father. Lin got beaten by him. The problem was he never learned. When the assembly finally ended, Li Ke did not linger. Li Ke gave a quick wave and bolted. Li Ke knew his father. Once the adrenaline of the meeting wore off, he'd remember how rude Li Ke was and reach for the wooden planks. So they couldn't understand how a graceful woman like his mother and a decisive man like his father produced a assassin who acted like Chang Jin's long-lost child. It was time to start the glass project. Li Ke had the blueprints in his head. Those were luxury items that would drain the pockets of every noble in Chang'an. Li Ke waited at Chang'an Gate. To get out of the palace, the officials had to pass through 3 sets of walls. Since the Department of State Affairs was on the left, Li Ke knew exactly where Wu Ji would exit. Is the Prince of Shu going to start a fist fight with the Duke of Qi right here in the street? He took one look at him, grinned, and stepped aside to make sure Wu Ji had a clear path toward him. He wasn't scared of him politically, but he was definitely scared of getting punched in the face in front of his colleagues. The third prince was waiting for the crown prince, Li Chong. Li Ke just wanted to stand there and make Wu Ji as uncomfortable as possible. Third brother Li Chongqian asked, looking confused. Li Chongqing paused. His relationship with him wasn't actually that bad. In fact, he got along with almost all the princes except for Li Tai. Big brother, Li Ke, called out loudly. Her singing is incredible. His treat today. Now Li Ke was inviting the crown prince to one, right in front of his face. Old man Cheng Yao Jine and the other generals nearby nearly died laughing. Li Ke had to hand it to himself. If Li Ke hadn't been afraid of the emperor, he would have invited Cheng Xian right outside the Tai Palace. Besides, a crown prince couldn't just wander into a place like that, even if it was just for the music. They all knew his secret. For years, every time Li Ke went to a brothel, he actually just listened to the music. To these rough old soldiers, that was the funniest thing in the world. Your Highness, you're still young. The civil officials frowned and headed around them, trying to distance themselves from the noise. Wu Ji let out a cold snort and stormed off. Third brother Li Chengqian explained with a helpless smile. Li Ke had duties to attend to. Fine. His father allowed him to use a carriage because of his leg injury, but Li Chengqian always refused. In these years since Li Ke had reincarnated, Li Chengqian had been a great older brother and an excellent crown prince. In history, he only went off the rails because his leg injury got worse, and his father started looking for a replacement. Once Li Chengqian was gone, Li Ke turned to Cheng Yaoyin and the others. Duke of Lu. Gentlemen, Li Ke was leaving. Li Ke headed straight for his estate outside the city. Meanwhile, back in the palace, his father was questioning his head eunuch. He almost said ran away. His father let out a cold huff. The Prince of Shu used a few jokes to deflect Wu Ji's complaints and force his hand on the marriage deal at the same time. Chang Lin stayed silent. If anyone else had played the emperor like that, their head would be on a spike. His father sighed. Li Ke already gave his word. Besides, now that the deal is said, maybe he'll stop beating up Wu Ji's son. That boy is nothing but trouble. He paused, noticing Chang Lin's hesitant expression. Speak up. What if the dowry the prince provides is actually worth more than the duke's betrothal gifts? His father stared at him. The Changsun family had been with him since the beginning. They were incredibly wealthy with massive business interests. The group will see, his father muttered, feeling a headache coming on. It's too late to change it anyway. If Wu Ji loses to a kid, he'll just have to deal with the embarrassment. Li Ke spent the next day at his estate, waiting for Lu Diang and the others to finish his secret projects. They're both finished. They work. Li Ke stood up, a smirk playing on his lips. Perfect. Let's see if Wu Ji still thinks he's the richest man in Chang'an. They had prepared the silk and the yarn for a test run. A spinner and a weaver stood by their stations, waiting for his command. They had already tested the machines before calling him, and they studied the equipment like it was a gift from the gods. It was magic. Show him, Li Ke said, waving a hand toward the spinning machine. Tian Meng signaled the worker. The man grabbed the large flywheel and gave it a powerful turn. That single motion set 16 smaller flywheels into a frantic spin. It wasn't just fast, it was 16 times faster than a traditional wheel. And this was just the beginning. The group be spinning 160. In the Tang Dynasty, silk wasn't just fabric. It was currency. Producing silk was literally like printing money. Usually, the profit margins were tight. 30% for raw materials, 40% for labor, and only 30% profit. That was why the great noble families were so rich. The shuttle flew back and forth with a mechanical rhythm that made the old manual methods look like they were moving in slow motion. Li Ke had done the math. The weaving efficiency has increased eightfold. Their total cost from buying raw silk to finishing a bolt of fabric is only 1/20th of their competitors. Most people spend about 210 to produce one bolt of silk. He explained the market price is 3,001. Their cost including logistics, it's only 961s. But if they optimize, they could get it down to 61 for the labor and processing. The group can churn out one spinning machine and one loom every 2 days. Tian Meng and the others bowed deeply. They were bowing to a man who was about to flip the entire economy of the Tang Dynasty on its head. The national tax revenue was roughly 2 million strings of cash, but a massive chunk of that, about 58%, was paid in silk and grain. Li Ke had an idea, he told Tian Meng. The current tax system, the Sanjiu, relies on every household providing silk or grain. The big noble families, the 5 great clans, and the 7 names. They control the officials in the land, but they don't control technology. In his old world, people called certain strategies dragon-slaying techniques. Li Ke wasn't looking to kill the emperor, but Li Ke was definitely going to skin the noble families alive. They aren't going to just sell silk, Li Ke explained. Tian Peng blinked, realization dawning on him. But will they really choose them over the powerful clans? Li Ke laughed. In this world, money doesn't just talk, it screams. The Chang'an family thought they were the richest in Chang'an. They thought they could use their wealth to buy his sister's future. By skipping the middlemen and buying raw silk directly from the peasants, Li Ke could make far more profit than the nobles ever did by producing it themselves. Li Ke asked, his voice deliberate. Li Ke gave him a thin smile. These small families were the ones who actually interacted with the people. The reincarnated prince didn't dare to even imagine the scale of it. It was about uniting every force that could be united. The great clans were the ultimate landlords, the ones who needed to be toppled. Everyone else was a potential ally. For now, Li Ke was acting as their factory. Li Ke held a monopoly on the production technology. By the time the great clans tried to catch up, Li Ke would bury them in a price war where they couldn't survive. Tian Meng nodded slowly. Li Ke thought so. Aside from their branches in the western regions and the grasslands, Li Ke wanted the Great Tang Trading Guild to hit every silk and hemp-producing region in the empire. The group used a different name so they don't draw fire too early. Then they approached the local small families. Li Ke laid out the pitch for him. Tell them they'll process their silk for 101 and their hemp for 80. Those new looms and spinning machines needed to be shipped to the production zones as fast as possible. Also, Li Ke added, start producing silk cotton blends. Use stone-milled lubrication. No limit on the colors. Tian Meng's eyes lit up as he did the math. The empire produced tens of millions of bolts of cloth every year. In the modern world, a logistics system that spanned a nation was worth trillions. Here, Li Ke was building that foundation. Even if the trading guild vanished tomorrow, the network of people Li Ke was binding together would remain. Take his personal seal, Li Ke said, waving a hand. Write the letters and send them out at once. In this era, no one would partner with a business that didn't have a powerful background. They'd just be eaten alive. By using his seal, Li Ke was telling these small families that they were partnering with royalty. As he hurried off, Li Ke turned his focus back to his other projects. Soap was a fortune, practically a license to print money. The chemical process produced glycerin, and without better equipment, it was dangerous. Glass, however, was moving faster. Li Ke spent the next 2 days staring at a sheet of green glass pressed onto an iron plate. The group had the process down. Li Ke told the workers, start blowing the glass. They needed cups, bottles, and jars. These are luxury items, so don't worry about mass production yet. The combination of mercury and glass created something magical. He had never seen his own reflection so clearly. Li Ke asked. 7 full-length mirrors like this one, Your Highness, he reported. Seal the workshop, Li Ke ordered. He wanted the blacksmiths and masons To build a wall around the glass factory. No one gets in. Train the workers, but keep the formula secret. Now load the mirrors onto the carriages. It's time to make some real money. Li Ke wasn't going far to sell them. Chang'an was the wealthiest city in the world. Li Ke headed straight for the Liangyi Hall, where his father, Li Shimin, usually handled his affairs. The emperor is in the inner chambers. A young eunuch whispered. The empress is feeling unwell today. Li Ke nodded. Empress Changsun's son had been frail since giving birth to Princess Shining last winter. In a commoner's house, that was likely why she was so desperate to see his sister Princess Changle married off soon. Understood, Li Ke said. It was time to show the emperor the future. Li Ke could not exactly bring these things by horse and carriage. They were far too fragile. Before Li Ke even stepped through the gates, his father, Li Shimin, had already received word of his arrival. She hadn't been feeling well lately, but she was resting in the small garden near the moon gate. When she heard his father's grumpy tone, she just smiled softly. He must have a reason for coming. The empress just chuckled. One must learn to be content with the small things. Li Ke knew his cheap old man was curious, even if he was pretending to be annoyed. Li Ke did not need their politics to be powerful, but his father didn't even give him a chance to open his mouth. As soon as Li Ke got close, he barked at him. His mind raced. Had Li Ke done something wrong recently? No, Li Ke had been on his best behavior. Was he just having a bad day and looking for a punching bag? Get over here, he roared. Li Ke shouted back, staying exactly where he was. Li Ke had not done anything. He let out a cold laugh. The young royal had completely forgotten that was a thing Li Ke was supposed to do, but he could not tell him that. That would be like handing him a stick to beat him with. Li Ke puffed out his chest and acted indignant. Li Ke told you last time he was a prince. Li Ke had just been in the way. His father rolled his eyes so hard, Li Ke thought they might get stuck. The empress watched them, clearly amused. She knew his father wasn't actually furious. If he were, he would have sent guards to drag him to the palace yesterday. He was just blowing off steam. Stop talking nonsense. And get over here. Li Ke grinned, his confidence returning. The empress looked curious. Oh, let's see then. Li Ke signaled his guards. They stepped forward and carefully opened the largest crate. They pulled out a tall rectangular object and began assembling a wooden frame. Once the frame was set, they lifted the full-length mirror into place. A thick red silk cloth covered the glasses. First, because she's the mother of the nation. And second, well, because Li Ke was hoping his father will be impressed enough to pay him for the rest. The empress let out a sharp gasp. Even his father, the great emperor of the Tang Dynasty, nearly jumped back. In front of them was a reflection so clear, it looked like another person was standing in the garden. It's a crystal mirror, mother, Li Ke explained with a smile. Li Ke made it himself. No woman in this century had ever seen herself like this. Li Ke had not even been able to pay his household servants for months. Tell him, how much would a mirror like this cost? Li Ke took a deep breath, ready to play his part. Every successful man has a virtuous woman behind him. His father is the emperor because you support him. Li Ke was not just looking for a wife. His father began out looking pleased. Li Ke was finally being a filial son. But as Li Ke kept talking, his expression shifted. He was right to be suspicious. Li Ke was laying it on thick, but he had a plan. This was only the beginning of the hustle. Li Ke hadn't forgotten about the other imperial consorts. Li Ke made sure to mention that he had already prepared mirrors for all his father's other wives, too. Li Ke said it with such righteous conviction that his father's face began to turn black. Li Shimin wasn't an idiot. The third prince knew exactly what Li Ke was doing. He could hear it too. The problem for his father was that Li Ke had backed him into a corner. Li Ke felt a massive wave of relief. You have a point, he continued, his voice dripping with a mix of annoyance and sarcasm. Li Ke could tell what he was thinking. He understood Li Ke was well-read. But that didn't mean he wasn't still a little brat. Most people read books to cultivate their character. Li Ke clearly used his education as a weapon to squeeze money out of him. How much for all of them? He questioned, staring at the gold-framed mirror with a dark expression. Because if you think the value is that great, Li Ke could always raise the price. These full-length mirrors are exclusively for the imperial family. No one else is allowed to use them. Li Shimin studied the mirror, which was as tall as he was, and nodded slowly. He did the math in his head. Li Ke could see him realizing. Li Ke had calculated this entire exchange long before he walked into the room. One of those mirrors is a gift of filial piety for you. You are a husband to these women and a father to them. Li Ke saw the gray hairs appearing on your head. Father, you work too hard. Li Shimin froze. Even Empress Chang's son looked stunned. Li Ke did not use fancy poetry or ancient quotes. He looked at him for a long moment, then let out a cold snort to hide his emotions. At least you have a conscience and remembered your mother and sisters. Thank you, father, Li Ke said, bowing deeply. Then Li Ke let a look of shame wash over his face. During that exchange, Empress Chang's son was moved. Li Ke told them how he had seen people freezing to death outside the city walls. Where there is light, there is shadow. Li Ke wanted to use this money to build the Great Tang Royal Welfare Park near the Wei River, he said firmly. The Prince of Shu told him he wanted to move his workshops and businesses into this park and primarily hire refugees and orphans. It was a way to solve the problem at the root. Li Shimin and the Empress exchanged a look. They were impressed. Every year, officials complained about it, but their only solution was more guards and harsher punishments. His plan was different. Li Ke wasn't just looking at the symptoms. Li Ke was looking at the cause. Other officials saw refugees as a burden, but Li Ke saw them as a resource. Li Ke knew he could not just take the court's money for this project. If Li Ke did, the officials would have their eyes on his business secrets. Li Ke did not want to use the treasury's money. Think of this as a trial run. Li Ke would test the method first to see if it actually works. Lehman looked intrigued. Go on. The goal isn't just to feed these people for free. The government can't afford to be a charity forever. Li Ke wanted to give them skills and jobs so they can support themselves. Li Ke was practically forcing himself to speak like a scholar now, using all the right formal phrases. It worked. The Prince of Shu could see him thinking that if he acted like this all the time, he'd have a lot fewer headaches. It's a noble cause. Then Li Ke would go to the Chang County magistrate to buy the land for the first phase. Li Ke said, playing it smart by offering to pay. Li waved his hand dismissively. Nonsense. You're doing this for the country with your own money. If Li Ke made you buy the land too, tomorrow, Li Ke would issue a decree. Li Ke pretended to look hesitant. But father, that's too much. Take it, Empress Chang's son said with a smile. Then Li Ke would not be polite. Li Ke grinned, giving the Empress a mental thumbs up. Li Ke can get started the moment he got back. Chonglin, bring the ink and paper. In the late Sui and early Tang dynasties, Xian paper was already becoming common. It was the high-quality stuff used for painting and calligraphy. Li Ke watched as Chonglin ground the ink, the rich a coin filling the room. Li Shimin asked, picking up the brush. Write the Great Tang Royal Welfare Park, Li Ke replied. You've certainly put a lot of heart into this today. Li Ke would write a few extra verses for you too. No, Li Ke blurted out, stopping him mid-stroke. Li Shimin froze, his eyes narrowing. Li Ke had to keep his Prince of Shu persona low-key and pathetic. It's just Li Ke had not achieved anything yet. Get out. Li Shimin laughed, cursing him playfully, asking him to write for 3 days. Forget it then. He finished the main inscription and set the brush down. Li Ke took the paper, feeling like he had just secured a golden shield. Li Ke would leave you and mother to enjoy some quiet time together. Li Shimin stared at him. The young royal teased. Li Ke might be young, but he had read books. Every woman wants her husband's affection. People will talk about your love for mother for generations. Li Ke would leave you to it. Li Ke gave them one last cheeky grin and bowed out. Li Ke left the mirrors behind his gifts and hurried out of the palace. Li Ke handed the calligraphy to his guard. The young royal stepped up behind her, wrapping his arms around her, in a rare moment of genuine, quiet affection. Meanwhile, Li Ke made his way toward the residences of his sisters. Changle, Princess Changle, and Princess Jinyang lived near the Empress's quarters. The moment the two little ones saw him, they stopped what they were doing and sprinted toward him. Li Ke smiled and knelt down, ready to be tackled by the only people in this palace who didn't want something from him. Princess Changle was a bit shy. She was 5 or 6 years old and starting to understand social boundaries. She didn't pull away. Instead, Princess Jinyang wrapped her tiny arms around his neck and spoke in a sweet, milky voice. Li Ke teased, grinning at her. Ninth brother won't even look at them, and big brother is always too busy. The ninth brother she mentioned was Lish, the future emperor, Gong. Right now, he was just an 8-year-old kid who took himself too seriously. Their eyes lit up instantly. They shouted in unison. Li Ke waved his hand and his guard stepped forward carrying several heavy crates. Li Ke did not waste any time. Li Ke had the guards open the crates and pull out the glass mirrors. Even Changle was stunned, her hand flying to her mouth as she stared at the mirror in disbelief. Li Ke love it. Xinyang chirped. She and Jin Yang immediately huddled in front of a mirror, making funny faces and admiring themselves. It's a mercury mirror. Li Ke whispered, leaning in so the little ones wouldn't hear. None of her other brothers, not even the crown prince or the fourth prince, cared about her future like this. To them, she was just a sister to greet politely. To him, she was family Li Ke would protect at all costs. Don't talk like that. Li Ke snapped gently. What Li Ke really meant was that unless there was another time traveler hiding in their estate, didn't stand a chance. Li Ke had to go now, he told them. Li Ke had things to do, and he needed to visit his mother. All three princesses shouted at once. They often visited her when Li Ke wasn't around. Her palace was located to the right of the Liangyi Hall. The rules in the Tang court weren't as suffocating as they would become in later dynasties, like the Ming or Qing. Any prince or princess living outside the palace had to pay their respects to the empress before visiting other consorts. Li Ke yelled at the top of his lungs as they approached his mother's quarters. Mom, they're here too. They technically shouldn't have been calling her mom, but in their little circle, nobody minded. Consort Yang hurried out of the palace. She was a gentlewoman, favored by the emperor, but never arrogant. She knew her place was delicate. It was all about the clans. His mother came from the Sui dynasty's royal family, the Hong Nongyong clan. Marrying her secured their support for the Tang throne. It was a game of power, and his mother played her role perfectly. She was much better behaved than Li Ke was. Come in, his mother explained, smiling warmly. Li Ke was here to bring you gifts, he said with a mischievous grin. Gifts that his father bought for you? His father wasn't exactly known for his shopping sprees. Li Ke had the guards bring the mirrors inside and showed her the silvered glass. Her reaction was the same as the others. Pure amazement. Li Ke knew he had given her plenty of gray hairs over the years, but she'd learned to live with his antics. Mom, it wasn't his idea. Li Ke protested, holding up his hands. Li Ke tried to give them to him for free. He said it was his responsibility, as a man, to provide for his family. It's the way of the world. Li Ke tried to refuse his gold, but he wouldn't hear of it. His mother, Connor Yang, shot him a look. She raised him. She knew exactly what kind of person Li Ke was. Auntie Changle chimed in, helping him out. He spent a fortune making these, and it's not like he has a regular income. His mother laughed, shaking her head at them. Princess Jingyang added with a wide, innocent grin. Li Ke reached out and rubbed the heads of his two youngest sisters. Li Ke did not spoil you two for nothing. In a few days, Li Ke would bring you even more good things. The group sat with his mother for about half an hour. Before Changle took the younger girls and left, she knew Li Ke had private matters to discuss with their mother. Changle always had a sense for these things. A guy like Chang'an didn't deserve a girl like her. As soon as the door closed, his mother's expression sharpened. As her brother, Li Ke was just looking out for her future. She hesitated, a sigh escaping her lips. The group all shared a father, but having different mothers meant there were invisible lines drawn between them. But Li Ke did not care about those lines. Li Ke treated everyone the same, including the crown prince, Li Chongchen. Well, everyone except Li Tai. But that was because he was a jerk to him first. Li Ke was particularly hard on his full-blooded younger brother Lin, though. Mother saw it too. If Li Ke did not keep him in check, he'd actually ruin his life. Unlike him, Lin caused trouble without a plan. His mother sighed again. She knew why Li Ke was so good to the sisters. It wasn't just affection. By staying close to the emperor's daughters and keeping Emperor Jiang's son happy, Li Ke was making sure his mother was protected. Li Ke might act like a hooligan, but he knew how to carry the weight of this family. As the eldest legitimate princess, Changle was spoiled by their father and had a massive private stash. No, Li Ke listened to you. Li Ke did not give him a coin, she said, looking frustrated. Lin was a disappointment. Years ago, his mother had to sell her own jewelry just to fund his lifestyle because they were broke. Don't hit him where the bruises will show. If he's afraid of looking bad, he shouldn't cause trouble, Li Ke countered. Li Ke got beaten by father all the time. Mother, Li Ke needed a favor. She looked curious. Li Ke rarely asked her for anything. Have a ladies' party. And then she asked. Show off, Li Ke said, pointing to the full-length mirror. Flaunt it. Make them green with envy. She wasn't slow. She caught on at once. Fine. Li Ke would do it. Great. Li Ke was heading out to find Changle. She has plenty of friends, too. His mother smiled as Li Ke rushed out. Most princes who moved out of the palace barely visited their mothers. Li Ke was leaving the rest of the mirrors here. Tell them they're gifts from father. His mother watched him go, a bittersweet look in her eyes. By letting her distribute the mirrors as gifts from the emperor, Li Ke was giving her immense social capital in the harem. Every consort would owe her a favor. Li Ke caught up with Changle and the little ones. Changle, Li Ke needed a hand. When they ask where to get one, tell them they're for sale at the someplace. She caught the vibe instantly. Li Ke got it. Li Ke wanted to go visit their eldest sister-in-law first. Li Ke gave her a massive thumbs up. His sister was a genius. Her family was influential, and as the crown princess, her social circle was the most powerful in the capital. Once the crown princess had won, every one of his brother's concubines would be desperate to buy their own. She had spent so much time around him that she was starting to pick up his modern slang and habits. Right. Li Ke laughed and gave her a pat on the head. Li Ke would send a large, high-quality mirror over to your place later today. You're amazing, third brother, she explained, her voice dropping even lower. Li Ke shot her a mock glare. Trick, what a terrible word to use. That wasn't a trick, Princess Changle. That was paternal love. Father just wants them to be happy. She giggled, her eyes crinkling into crescent. She knew exactly what Li Ke was doing, but she loved the chaos of it. Then her expression turned serious. Li Ke gave her a knowing smirk. She tilted her head, confused by the term. Don't worry about it, Li Ke said, waving her off. By then, the Chang'an family won't even be a blip on their radar. She nodded vigorously. Li Ke left the palace and headed straight for the someplace inn and the Shana district. In modern terms, that was over 5 kilometers, roughly the size of the initial high-tech zones back in his old world. The group can start moving, the scented soaps in here. Li Ke told Tianmeng as they walked the grounds. The group need to create tiers of quality. The packaging is everything. People need to feel like they're buying luxury. Li Ke was holding back on the regular laundry soap for now. Li Ke needed it for a different project, degazing wool. Even the nobles in Chang'an who bathed daily couldn't get rid of that stench for years. But if Li Ke could degrease the wool, he could turn it into high-end textiles that would rival silk and profit. Li Ke would handle the furniture, he said, dismissing the question. Li Ke had got a source. Just focus on the windows and doors. This is their flagship project, Tianmeng. It has to be perfect. Good. Li Ke was heading over to Bright Moon Tower for a meal and some entertainment. Tianmeng blinked, looking at the sun. Li Ke was going to appreciate the artistic talents of the top courtesans. You're too vulgar, Tianmeng. You don't understand his refined intentions. His apologies, Highness, he explained quickly. Li Ke was shallow. Li Ke hopped onto his horse. Li Ke preferred riding to carriages. People might judge, but in the Tang Dynasty, the entertainment districts were right next to the Imperial Academy. Even the great scholar Chu Su-yang lived in this neighborhood. Going to a flower house wasn't a scandal. When Li Ke arrived at the gates of Bright Moon Tower, the attendants scrambled to greet him. Prince of Shu, welcome. They chirped, bowing low. They didn't dare block his path. A few years ago, someone had tried. After all, if Li Ke was willing to beat up the son of the most powerful official in the empire, a few bouncers weren't going to stop him. In this world, the day before the Qingming festival was for cold food and no fires. It was the perfect time for a prince to disappear into a crowd and enjoy the view. Life in Chong was vibrant, and a place like Bright Moon Tower wasn't about to let a business opportunity slip by. It was ironic how a day meant for the dead ended up being so lively for the living. People came here for fun, not to put on airs, and even the high-ranking officials liked to keep things low-key. Whenever Li Ke showed up, he made sure everyone knew. It was a matter of survival for his furniture. Li Ke scanned the room and spotted a few familiar faces from the capital's elite circles. Yo, the Prince of Shu is here, a burly young man shouted from a nearby table. Li Ke raised an eyebrow. In the history Li Ke knew, he was supposed to marry Princess Changle. Chinga's mother wasn't even a high-ranking consort, so she lived a quiet life on the fringes of the palace. He was 26, already held an official post, and was definitely old enough to know better than to be here this early. Beside him was Qin Hua, the son of Qin Xiang. They both stood up and bowed to him respectfully. Plus, word on the street is you told the crown prince that Bright Moon Tower has a new top courtesan. Li Ke rolled his eyes. Cut the crap. Li Ke can see there are plenty of new faces here today. Li Ke received along well with the sons of these generals. They were all cut from the same cloth. They thought Li Ke was a brute, even more univilized than their fathers. Li Ke found it hilarious. Yuchi Balin whispered, leaning in. When it comes to these houses, you're the expert. They were hoping you'd show them the ropes. Screw off, Yuchi Balin added, his voice dropping lower. Li Ke tapped the table rhythmically. Yuchi Balin, Leon, and Xin Huao all stared at him. Their expressions said it all. Suddenly, a drunken, slurred voice drifted down from the balcony above. The Prince of Shu. That brat doesn't know the first thing about refined company. Li Ke looked up, his eyes narrowing. Great. Someone was asking for a beating. A stumbling figure was making his way down the stairs. Judging by his expensive silk robes, he was royalty. Most commoners wouldn't dare insult him to his face. As he turned his head, Li Ke recognized him immediately. It was Li Yuancheng, the Prince of Lu. Though technically his elder, he was only a year older than him. Li Ke did not say a word. Wait. Yuchi Bowen grabbed his arm, looking panicked. During that exchange, forget it. He's drunk. Li Ke studied Yuchi bowing coldly, who explained he was going to hit him. Li Ke shook his hand off. They knew his temper. The young royal reached down, grabbed a full jar of wine from the table, and began walking toward the stairs. Don't! Xinhua tried to block him. One hit with that jar, and he's dead. Manager Liu, the man in charge of the tower, came running out, sweating bullets. He's just a drunk. Don't lower yourself to his level. The others chimed in. Li Ke ignored them. Li Ke looked at the wine jar in his hand, then at the surrounding nobles who were all watching with bated breath. Before anyone could react, Li Ke lifted the heavy jar and began chugging the wine. Tang Dynasty wine wasn't distilled yet. Li Ke could drink several jars of this stuff without feeling a thing, aside from a bloated stomach and a frequent need for the bathroom. But today, Li Ke had a different reason for drinking. Li Ke needed an excuse. The crowd of noble brats stared at him, jaws dropping. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Li Ke did not care. Li Ke tilted the heavy jar back and let the wine flow down his throat like water. Years of experience had taught him exactly how to look the part. Li Ke slammed the empty jar onto the floor. His eyes went blurry and unfocused. Li Ke looked like a man who had completely lost his mind to the bottle. To most of the powerful men who came here, these women were just property. They were goods to be bought and sold. They had seen him scrap before, but they had never seen him do something this reckless. Li Xuanchong stood there, his fake bravado vanishing instantly. He wasn't nearly as drunk as he pretended to be. They were trying to negotiate a marriage with a commoner's daughter. It was just a polite way of saying they were kidnapping her. Li Ke stepped in and saved her, and Li Yucheng never forgot that. He thought Li Ke was targeting him on purpose. He knew he couldn't touch him directly, since Li Ke was the emperor's son, and he was just a brother. The reincarnated prince thought Li Ke wouldn't dare strike an elder. He was wrong, he shouted. His voice cracked with fear. He turned a bolt for the stairs. Li Ke was faster. Li Ke lunged forward, stumbling like a drunkard, and caught him firmly by the collar. During that exchange, Li Ke wared. Li Ke slammed him to the floor and climbed on top of him. His fists started flying. No one moved. The nobles and scholars stood frozen, watching the violence unfold. If they accidentally touched one of them during the struggle, their heads would roll. Especially him. They knew his reputation. Li Yuancheng was a scholar. He prided himself on his calligraphy and painting. He looked down on him as a brute, a stain on the royal family's dignity. Li Ke had beaten Chang Sunchong over 100 times in his life. Li Ke was an expert in pain. Manager Liu rushed to Yuchi Bowen, his face pale with terror. He knew him better than anyone. If he tried to stop a drunk Li Ke, he'd be the next one on the floor. Manager Liu's face turned into a mask of pure misery. In his eyes, Li Ke was usually the best royal to deal with. He probably wondered if his tower would even be standing by the time Li Ke was finished. Li Ke was sorry. He was wrong. Li Yuncheng screamed. He clearly didn't have the experience Chang Suncheng had. If this were Chang Sunchong, he would have curled into a ball, protected his face, and waited for him to get tired. Li Yuancheng tried to fight back, twisting his body and flailing his arms to push him off. Li Ke wasn't having it. Li Ke straddled him, pinning his torso down with his legs like a vice. If Chang Sunchong had been there, he would have told his uncle to just give up. Li Ke stood up, wiping his brow. Beating someone while pretending to be drunk was actually exhausting work. Li Ke stood up a bit too fast, and a wave of dizziness hit him. Don't wait until tomorrow. It'll be too late. Li Ke stumbled, nearly losing his balance. Yuchi Bowen rushed over and caught his arm to steady him. Li Ke just shook him off and pointed at Luan Chong again. Go to his grandfather. Li Ke was the one who should go find his father. Balin nearly choked, trying to hold back a laugh. If they laughed now, they might be the next ones running home to their fathers with a black eye. His face flushed a deep, angry crimson. A massive bruise was already blooming on his left cheek. He clearly wanted to drop some parting threats. But looking at his drunken state, he lost his nerve. This mess wasn't the brothel's fault, and if a royal tried to shut him down over a drunken brawl, it would be a public embarrassment for them. Everyone knew the Prince of Shu was a troublemaker, but he never let innocent bystanders take the fall for his messes. Li Ke waved Balan away, looking at him with pure disdain. Li Ke turned to the room, his voice loud and mocking. "It's pathetic." Fallen groaned. "Your Highness, the Prince of Lu, was the one who annoyed you." Up on the stage, the top courtesans giggled behind their sleeves. They weren't offended. They were amused. Li Ke ignored Balan and stumbled toward the central high platform where the performers stood. One of the beauties chirped. Her face lit up with genuine joy. She didn't hesitate for a second, rushing down and grabbing his arms to help him up the steps. "Let him see." All four of the top courtesans swarmed him, chirping with concern and fussing over his knuckles. Seeing this, Balan and the other young nobles looked like they wanted to die of envy. They might eventually become a high-ranking official's concubine. But they didn't just sleep with anyone who walked through the door. In the Tang Dynasty, these women were technically free citizens, and their establishments were for music and conversation, not just sex. Most nobles spent months just trying to get a smile out of them. But with him, they were practically tripping over each other to be near him. Crown Prince Li Changxian and his brother Li Tai had both visited this place before. Li Ke waved the girls off to show he was fine, then pointed at the scholars below. "Stop being so hypocritical." Li Ke was insulting every person in the room, but they were used to it. Most of them just grumbled under their breath about him having no class. You don't have a clue what they're thinking, yet you expect them to invite you into their private quarters. Li Ke studied the women surrounding him. They were all looking at him with shy, expectant eyes. Each one was a natural beauty, better than any filtered influencer from his old world. Even the girls seemed curious to hear his answer. Li Ke smiled and began to recite, his voice steady despite the act. Before the guests, she smiles and gives herself away, hiding the sorrow of 1,000 pieces of gold. As Li Ke spoke, the girls' eyes grew brighter and brighter. By the time Li Ke finished, they were practically glowing. Below the stage, the scholars were stunned into silence. They looked at each other, confused and humbled. They had never heard those words before, but the raw emotion in them hit harder than any of his punches ever could. In his head, Li Ke gave a silent nod to Lu Yong, the legendary poet from the future. He was the undisputed king of the brothel, and his verses were like a cheat code for winning over women. Her voice was so soft and sweet it could melt bone. She and the other girls were literate. They understood every layer of meaning Li Ke had laid out. They were a lifeline. His friends, Yuchi Balan, Xinhua, and Li Dian stood there like idiots, even though Li Ke knew he hadn't understood a single word. He didn't care about poetry. He just liked that Li Ke was winning. "Don't think Li Ke was a good man just because of a few words," he said, leaning back with a smirk. "If a man hides his desires, it's filth." The manager of the house, old Lu, looked like he was about to faint. If Li Ke kept this up, he wouldn't have a business left. Suddenly, a voice shouted from the crowd of scholars. Anning didn't blink. She gave him a cold, professional smile. "It is, but that doesn't mean Li Ke had to agree." The guy choked on his own breath, silenced by the double standard. He ushered the disgruntled scholars out, leaving only him and his 3 friends in the massive hall. Right, Lian stammered. "Well, head over to the Ming Web building instead. Plenty of other places in the district." It was the middle of the day, so the usual rush hadn't started yet. Old Lu approached him cautiously. He had lived through the fall of the Sui dynasty and the rise of the Tang. "No need for upstairs," Li Ke said, clapping his hands. "Call all the girls down." Li Ke wanted everyone here. Li Ke still wasn't used to the Tang terminology. Calling young women lady or little lady felt stiff. But Li Ke had a goal. The High Web building had the highest quality performers in the entire capital, rivaled only by 2 other houses. In the Pingkong district, every brothel has a powerful backer pulling the strings from the shadows, taking the lion's share of the profits. Because the business was stable and the former owner had kept a low profile, nobody understood the seat was empty. Li Ke only found out by accident through his intelligence network at the Lin. "Everyone, find a seat," Li Ke explained, flashing a smile. Li Ke had a question. Li Ke started, his voice calm. One of the girls laughed, but the sound was bitter. "The best they can hope for is to find a decent man to take them in as a lowly concubine." Li Ke knew their stories. Many were born into this life. Others were the wives and daughters of officials who had committed crimes. Most chose this life over exile. Exile meant being sent to the Lingan region, the far south. At least in Chang'an, they had food and a roof over their heads. Li Ke asked, scanning the room. Old Lu sat nearby, looking like he had a thorn in his throat. He sensed something big was coming, and he couldn't stop it. They wanted it, but they didn't believe it was possible. The girl stared at him like Li Ke had grown a second head. Ke looked over at her. In this era, a woman in her 30s was practically a grandmother. She was bold. Li Ke snapped, his face darkening. The reincarnated prince was redeeming you to give you a better life. The group were very hard workers. They can be very useful. Enough of that, Li Ke said, waving her off. Once Li Ke redeem you, he was going to find a way to change your legal status from outcasts to common citizens. The laughter died instantly. They were stunned. To be a commoner was the ultimate dream. These women were the latter. Property, not people. Li Ke wasn't just being a nice guy. They were the perfect foundation for the empire. Li Ke was building in the shadows. In the Tang Dynasty, your status was everything. If you were a laborer, you were bound to a master. Even if Li Ke bought these women, they would simply transition from being the state's property to his control. Luckily, Li Ke was the Prince of Shu. Li Ke had that power. The girls stood there frozen in shock. Li Ke looked over at the manager, a woman who had spent years navigating the dangerous waters of the capital. Manager Lu, they needed to talk, Li Ke explained. Li Ke turned and walked toward a private room. Li Ke did not look back. Another mentioned she had saved up enough to buy her own freedom, but she had nowhere to go. They were scared, but for the first time, they were hopeful. Inside the room, Li Ke sat down and looked at Manager Lu. Color drained from her face. She shivered, then let out a long, ragged sigh. She told him how she had been struggling to keep the place running, using old favors and connections, just to keep the officials from seizing it. She looked relieved that the secret was finally out. Li Ke was buying this place, he told her. She blinked, confused. Li Ke told her she could keep all the profits the house had made over the years. Li Ke did not want her money. Li Ke wanted the contracts of every person in this building. Li Ke wanted her loyalty. She was smart. She knew that without a protector like him, she wouldn't last another month. She straightened up, her professional mask returning. She told him there were 32 performers in total. Then she added something that caught him off guard, except for one who had been married before. They were all virgins. Li Ke thought he had misheard. This was a brothel after all. But then Li Ke understood his modern bias was showing. In the high-end houses of the Tang Dynasty, the top-tier girls were artists. They were singers, dancers, and poets. It made them exclusive. It made them expensive. They were treated like rare masterpieces that people paid just to look at. She even joked that if Li Ke wasn't interested in the young girls, she was still available, despite being over 40. Li Ke snapped. Li Ke wanted to give them a better life, but he was glad they've kept their dignity. It makes things easier, she continued the report. Including the servants and guards, there were 45 people under contract. Li Ke said he did not care about the earnings, because as of this moment, Hulu is no longer in the entertainment business. Li Ke added one more thing to sweeten the deal. Li Ke told Manager Lu that she could keep all the previous profits from Hulu. The third prince waved his hand dismissively as she stared at him in shock. Li Ke told her they were closing for business immediately. She looked stunned. She asked if Li Ke was serious. Li Ke nodded. Li Ke had new plans for them. Li Ke asked her whether she knew about the Eugene and over in the Shanghai district. She nodded again. Li Ke told her that was his property. That was where they would be performing from now on. She looked at him with a new kind of intensity. Li Ke could tell that from this day forward, Manager Luo belonged to his faction. She belonged to the Prince of Shu body and soul. Li Ke told her to follow him out. Li Ke walked back onto the central stage and let a small smile spread across his face. Li Ke told them he had good news. Li Ke had just bought the entire Hulu. Li Ke told them that in a way he had just redeemed all of them. Others looked like they were about to collapse to their knees in gratitude. Li Ke raised his hand to quiet them down. Li Ke laid out the new rules. First, Hulu was closed to the public. It was their home now, not a business. They didn't seem surprised by that. Li Ke could see them wondering if he was just going to move them all into his palace. They would still perform, but not here. They would move to the Eugene Inn. Li Ke explained that things would be different there. Li Ke told them plainly that if any man tried to touch them or cause trouble, they didn't have to worry. Li Ke would handle it personally. The girls started murmuring excitedly. They knew his reputation. A promise from the Prince of Shu was worth its weight in gold. No one ever stood up for them. Now they had a prince as their shield. Li told them they could keep every single cent of the tips they received. Li Ke told them that after working for him for just 1 year, he would restore their status as common citizens. If they found someone they loved, they could get married. And Li Ke would even provide their dowry. She looked like she was about to cry. For these women, legal freedom was a dream they never expected to reach. By promising salaries, regular rest, marriage support, and legal freedom after 1 year, Li Ke gave the rescued women a future as citizens.